Hello there, and this is My PMQs really good.
I suspect the new member for Mid-Beds may actually support me a little bit more than the last one.
Epic bad.
Just to say, it's Prime Minister's questions, not opposition questions.
And ugly. Sorry, that was too much even for me. And there's also a very important question at the end, so do stick around for that, my friends. But we'll start with, who outjoked who between the rather high-spirited Keir Starmer about the newly elected MPs for Mid-Bedfordshire and Tamworth, where he made a slight joke at the expense of the Lib Dems, and our Prime Minister made a dig at Mad Nad.
Can I start by welcoming the new member for Mid-Bedfordshire? The first Labour MP ever to represent those beautiful towns and villages. He defied the odds, history, and of course the fantasy Lib Dem bar charts.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of what this government is doing to support the most vulnerable over the past year. But, Mr. Speaker, can I in fact join him in welcoming the new members to their places? After all, I suspect the new member for Mid-Beds may actually support me a little bit more than the last one.
To be fair, I think I'll give that to the Prime Minister. Not bad at all. No doubt Mad Nad will have been chomping off the top of her second bottle of gin when she heard that joke at her expense. But the thing is, Keir Starmer, after that, asked him to condemn what the Tory candidate did, and he still didn't condemn what Andrew Cooper said, and just wittered on about local housing and Greenbelt and who said what and the other, but nothing about condemning what Andrew Cooper said. And that just gave Keir Starmer the opportunity to just say this.
Well, so much for being the change candidate, he can't even distance himself from those appalling comments.
Exactly. Why didn't he just distance himself and the party from this losing candidate and say that what he said a few years ago doesn't agree with the party values? What do you guys think? Let me know down below. And it just gave Starmer more ammo to repeat the question, and again he still didn't disown him. And he just kept giving himself a pat on the back for, I don't know.
Record increases in the national living wage, record increases in welfare, and this winter, Mr. Speaker, pensioners to receive an extra £200 or £300 alongside their winter fuel payment to help them through what we know is a tough time.
See, the thing is, when middle-class people are feeling the pinch, that ain't going to wash, is it? But then I found this bit a very interesting part between the two, when Keir Starmer talked about a mother and her two children from Tamworth.
But I can see why the Tamworth candidate thought he was just following government lines. Annalisa and her two children lived in their home for 8 years. In May, they were kicked out with a no-fault eviction notice. Despite his government's pledge to scrap no-fault evictions, this week the Prime Minister crumbled to the landlords on his own backbenches and killed the policy. What message, other than the message delivered by his candidate in Tamworth, could Annalisa possibly take from that?
Mr. Speaker, we've taken significant action to help renters like Annalise and others. We've capped holding deposits at 1 week. We've protected tenants from rip-off tenancy fees, delivered almost 500,000 affordable homes for rent, and halved the number of percentage of substandard homes in the private rented sector, and strengthened local authority enforcement powers, because this government is delivering for renters. But we are also, Mr. Speaker, trying to ensure the new generation can buy their own home. So perhaps he can explain to Annalisa and thousands and millions of others why, when we brought forward plans to unlock 100,000 new homes, he stood in the way of that.
Just to say, it's Prime Minister's questions, not opposition questions. Keir Starmer. Sorry, Prime Minister. It is Prime Minister's questions. I don't need you nodding against my decision. Yes.
Well, I'm sure Annalise and her children who've now been evicted will take great comfort from that non-answer. Emma and her teenage son saw their mortgage go up by more than a quarter. Well, they may think this is funny. This is real life. After 16 years of dutifully paying their mortgage, for the first time she's having to choose between new shoes for her son and putting the heating on. All because his party crashed the economy, pushing mortgage rates to their highest levels in decades. He says ignore all that. Ignore the fact that the guilty men and women responsible are standing again as his candidates and still setting his policy. Can he not see why Emma might think that his party is telling them exactly where to go?
Mr. Speaker, he keeps talking about the mini-budget. I won't ask him a question, Mr. Speaker. Well, I will just point out he did actually support 95% of the things in that mini-budget, which I didn't, Mr. Speaker. But again, he's had a whole summer to get on top of the details. He's still ignoring the fact that rising interest rates are a global challenge. They are at their highest level in America and Europe for more than 20 or 30 years. Mortgage rates have doubled in America, trebled in Europe. Now, what we do want to do to help mortgage holders is ensure that they can use the mortgage charter that we've agreed with the banks. And thanks to the steps that we've taken, someone with a £200,000 property with about £100,000 left on their mortgage could save over £350 a month and lock in a new deal 6 months before theirs ended, and repossessions will be prohibited for 12 months from the first missed payment. He might have missed that policy is twice as generous as Labour's.
Absolutely tone deaf. In every cafe, pub and supermarket in Britain having the same conversation. We can't afford that. Put it back on the shelf. It's too expensive. He is completely oblivious, just patting himself on the back. Emily and Jamie have worked hard and saving for years to buy their own home. They were nearly there last year, but he scrapped house building targets because his backbenchers pushed him around. House building has fallen off a cliff, shattering the simple dream of home ownership for people like Emily and Jamie. Can the Prime Minister now see that actually his candidate in Tamworth was just loyally following the party line?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think these prepared lines really aren't working for him anymore. He literally asked a question. He literally asked me a question about the support that we're providing for mortgage holders. I gave him the answer to that question, and then he read from his script to say that we hadn't answered the question.
Sorry for the extended drivel from our Prime Minister, but I found the bit about Keir Starmer apparently agreeing with 95% of the mini-budget when, if I remember rightly, Labour said it was detached with reality. Just absolutely hilarious. Also, the arrogance when getting a telling off from Lindsay Hoyle shows you just how rubbish he is at this, isn't he? When Keir Starmer said this...
Emma and her teenage son saw their mortgage go up by more than a quarter. Well, they may think this is funny. This is real life.
It highlights a bit of a thing in Parliament where I listened to Carol Vorderman today, where people moaned about when people are struggling, those who are supposed to be the adults in the room are just acting like naughty school children, smoking on the back of the school bus. It's just not a good look, is it? Anyway, then he waffled on about interest rates being a global problem. And it is in a way, but this nonsense, it really is just nonsense, innit? Especially when ours is the highest, if I remember rightly, and wages haven't gone up either. But still he won't condemn what Andrew Cooper did, does he? But when our Prime Minister says this...
Mr. Speaker, I think these prepared lines really aren't working for him anymore. He literally asked a...
I found this statement quite insulting to those people who are either being given, is it Section 21, or cannot afford their mortgage as simply. Prepared lines are now not really working anymore. I found that quite insulting, and again, he didn't disown what Andrew Cooper did he? Now, in place of Stephen Flynn was Deputy Leader of the SNP, Mhairi Black, whose questioning was about calling for a ceasefire in Gaza.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Yesterday, the UN warned that hospitals in Gaza had just 48 hours of fuel left to keep their electricity going. That was 28 hours ago. The electricity runs out tonight. Now, we have a human responsibility to all the people in Gaza, but we have a particular responsibility for UK citizens, some of whom are in those hospitals with no food, no water, no medicine and no way out. So I want to ask the Prime Minister, how much worse does the situation have to get before he will join us in calls for a humanitarian ceasefire?
Mr Speaker, from the start, we have said that the first and most important principle is that Israel has the right to defend itself under international law. Our support for that position is absolute and unchanged. But from the start, we have also said that we do want British nationals to be able to leave Gaza, and that we want hostages to be released and for humanitarian aid to get in. And we recognise that for all of that to happen, there has to be a safer environment, which of course necessitates specific pauses as distinct from a ceasefire. And we discussed this with partners yesterday evening at the United Nations. And we have also been consistently clear that everything must be done to protect civilians in line with international law and continue getting more aid flowing into Gaza.
Mhairi.
Mr Speaker, the growing calls for a ceasefire is also about calming the situation in the broader region, especially the West Bank. UNICEF has reported over 2,000 fatalities and over 5,000 injured children since the conflict began due to unrelenting attacks. If we ignore this, we risk pouring petrol on a fire in a place that only requires a spark to ignite. Can the Prime Minister understand that joining calls for a ceasefire is now the best and maybe the only way to stop this conflict escalating beyond all control?
Mr Speaker, we do have to remember that Israel has suffered a shockingly brutal terrorist attack. Hamas is responsible for this conflict and has the right to protect itself in line with international law. As the UN Charter makes clear, we will continue to urge the Israelis to follow international law, whilst we also have to remember that Hamas cruelly embeds itself in civilian populations. But we are doing everything we can to get aid into the region. I'm pleased to say an RAF flight left the UK this morning for Egypt carrying 21 tonnes of aid for Gaza. The relief supplies include over 75,000 medical kits, solar lights, water filters for families and warehousing equipment. Our team are on the ground ready to receive. We will continue to do everything we can to increase the flow of aid, including fuel, into Gaza.
I don't know about you, but I'm getting a little bored of the Israel has a right to defend itself as long as it's under international law line. Am I the only one? I don't see how cutting off essential supplies is within international law, if I'm honest. But if it's true that, 21 tonnes of aid is going there, that's the start in it. But without a ceasefire, wouldn't that be a bit difficult to get to them anyway? I don't know, but let me know if you know better than me, but I thought the MP for Foyle and Social Democrat and Labour parties, Colum, Eastwood, brought up an interesting slant on the situation.
Mr Speaker, a few short months ago the world came to Belfast to celebrate the Good Friday Agreement. At the heart of that agreement was the realisation that we could not use violence as a tool for revenge or to achieve our political aims. As 1,400 Israelis and almost 6,000 Palestinians lay dying and dead, when will the Prime Minister say enough is enough? When will he call for a ceasefire? When will he tell Israel to stop meting out collective punishment on the people of Gaza? And when will he and other world leaders insist on a political solution that involves a Palestinian state for the Palestinian people?
Well, Mr Speaker, as I said, an important principle is that Israel does have the right to defend itself under international law to ensure that attacks like this, which were brutal and horrific for their citizens, can't happen again, and we continue to support that position. But as I said, from the start, we've also wanted to ensure humanitarian aid can go in and hostages and nationals can come out. We recognise that that means there has to be a safer environment, which of course necessitates specific pauses as distinct from a ceasefire, and we discussed exactly this with our international partners yesterday at the United Nations and will continue to do so. And as I made clear on Monday, we have double down on our efforts to find a better future for the Palestinian people. It's been a feature of all our diplomacy in the region, and we will continue to give all our efforts to making that happen.
Again, there's that line, ain't it? I've said it before. It's as if the suffering of those innocent people in Gaza was just a bit of an afterthought. It's quite ridiculous, isn't it? But I did find the way Colum Eastwood framed his question was quite good, actually, if I'm honest. But anyway, I do hope you've not just eaten, or not in the process of having food. It's going to get rather steamy now. Now, remember when you were at school and every class had one, didn't they? You know, a pupil who was a bit of a telltale tit. You know, the teacher's pet whose life ambition was to dish out the milk at break time because it gave him that sense of power. Enter the father of the house, Sir Peter Bottomley.
We know some duck serious questions today, aiming for electoral advantage in the future. Can I note that the Prime Minister prefers to take decisions that will benefit the country now in the longer term, so that we can have more jobs, better education, and a shared prosperity?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his kind
words. Sorry, that was too much even for me. You two, get a room. But did you see his munchkin little face at the end? Oh, how pleased he was with himself. So much so even our prime minister, shifty shoe size, looked rather embarrassed for him. But the compliments didn't last too long, anyway, for our prime minister, because Labour MP Lillian Greenwood brought up a rather touchy subject.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's important that the COVID inquiry has all the relevant documents. That's what the public, including thousands of bereaved families, expect and deserve. But despite being a self-described tech bro, the Prime Minister has been unable to locate and provide his WhatsApp messages to the inquiry. Does he agree that devices should be handed over to experts to retrieve this information?
Mr. Speaker, both the government and I have fully cooperated to provide tens of thousands of documents to the COVID inquiry, and I look forward to giving evidence later this year.
Yeah, tech bro. Couldn't wait to get away from this subject, could he? I never saw him move so fast away from that dispatch box. But on the serious note, the way this government and party have acted towards this inquiry is nothing short of a disgrace, isn't it? Let me know what you guys think down below. But it doesn't get any better for our tech bro when Labour MP Ruth Cadbury asked what I thought was the best question of the day for me.
It is an honour to be elected to this place, and the standards by which we are expected to abide matter. So does the Prime Minister accept that it was ill-judged for him to fail to declare to Parliament that companies linked to his wife had benefited to the tune of £2 million from a fund he had set up as Chancellor? Will he correct the record now?
Shocking. Mr. Speaker, it's worth bearing in mind that the Labour frontbenchers backed the Future Fund when it was introduced. Indeed, they were calling for more funding for it, not less. The House will be aware of my wife's shareholdings in various British startups, so that's her career, which are on the record, and I'm happy to put on the record again. But it is worth bearing in mind that the Future Fund helped over 1,200 different companies. Neither the government nor the British Business Bank chose any of those specific investments. It was open to any British firm that met the criteria.
Yes, Your Honour, I did rob that bank down the high street that day. But so what? Banks get robbed every day, you know, Your Honour. So what's your point? Also, Titch, I don't think Labour went on their hands and knees crawling to you saying, "Please, Prime Minister, please set up a business that will make your non-dom wife £2 million and don't declare it, please." What a snivelling little shit. Also, in my view, long before she professed her undying love for her best friend on that conference stage, she was fair game politically. But Labour's Yasmin Qureshi sorry if I didn't say it right, really brought home the dire situation that's happening in Gaza.
There's an email in my inbox from a constituent who has family in Gaza. It reads, "My heart can't handle this anymore. We are being massacred, relentlessly bombed, homes are being destroyed, no water, no food, no electricity. Save the Children reported that one child is killed every 15 minutes. And as I speak, the lives of 130 babies in incubators are in danger if fuel does not reach their hospital in time. This is collective punishment of the Palestinian people in Gaza for crimes they did not commit. How many more innocent Palestinians must die before this Prime Minister calls for humanitarian ceasefire?"
Well, Mr. Speaker, I welcome that there is, in fact, unity across these dispatch boxes on Israel's right to defend itself in face of an unspeakable act of terror. But it is also clear that we must support the Palestinian people. They are victims of Hamas too. Hamas uses innocent people as human shields, and we mourn the loss of every innocent life, people of every faith, of every nationality, and we are working as hard as we can to get as much humanitarian aid into Gaza as quickly as practically possible.
Yasmin asked for a humanitarian ceasefire, not platitudes. You can criticise Israeli government for the way they're handling this, you know. You're not going to go to hell for it, teacher. It's painful watching, the mental gymnastics they do on this subject. Right. I said there was a very important question at the end. Well, it wasn't really a question. It was more of a point of order that came from Labour's John McDonnell after PMQs.
The House rises tomorrow for 10 days, I believe. It is regrettably and sadly, it may be likely that a ground invasion of Gaza commences during that period. This doesn't just have consequences for the Palestinians or the Israelis. It could create turmoil in the Middle East overall, destabilising the whole of the Middle East. If that takes place, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate it is the government that determines whether or not Parliament is recalled. But could I ask you, in your conversations with government on this, that you do advise them that the House should be recalled to debate such a serious issue?
It wouldn't be under normal rules, you're absolutely right. And I do recognise the absolute importance of a major escalation in what could happen within the Middle East. And you are correct, it would be for the government, not for me, unfortunately, to be able to recall the House. And what I would say is I will work through usual channels to try and ensure, quite rightly, that we would look to see what could be done under those special circumstances. And what I would say is it will be a special circumstance because obviously the House is broke. So I don't lose sight of what he said. I take that on board and will work behind the scenes with others to see how we will manage such a situation. Sorry, further step point one, Lillian.
Point of order. I can assure the House that the FCDO, my office and other departments across Whitehall are very aware that this House will want to be kept updated about the ongoing situation. Many honourable members and right honourable members will have constituents who are directly affected by this, and we are working with the House of Commons Library to ensure that during the recess people are updated about the situation.
Okay.
Some MPs are on another jolly for 10 days there. More holidays than Judith Chalmers, aren't there? But yeah, this is a very serious situation. I really do hope that if things escalate, they do recall MPs back to the Commons. Anyway, that was my good, bad and the ugly from this week's PMQs. What was yours, my friends? Let me know down below and I shall just bid you farewell and take care, my friends.